Good evening to the Overview and Scrutiny panel for April. Before we start, I'd like to introduce the new Corporate Director for Place, Mike Gildersleeve, my apologies. Mike, would you like to just introduce yourself briefly?
Good evening, members. Mike Gildersleeves, Corporate Director for Place. I've recently joined middle of March from the South and East Lincolnshire Councils Partnership. Just looking forward to meeting various members and getting involved with the various projects that we've got on the go and working with the rest of the teams to deliver the ambitions of the council. So look forward to working with you all.
Thank you and welcome. All right, apologies.
So we have apologies from Councillors Howell and Martin.
Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting.
So within your packs, you've got the minutes of the last meeting. Were there any comments or questions, or are you happy for the Chair to sign them?
Item 2, members' interests.
Good evening, Chair. Item 7, actually, I'm a trustee of Ramsey Community Centre, which is one of the SIL potential recipients.
Yes, Chair. On item 7 again, I am Chairman of Grafham Parish Council with regard to their SIL application, so just to make that clear.
Chairman, item 7 again, I'm a member of Huntingdon Town Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5, Market Towns Programme Spring Update. As I'm a resident of the Broadway and St Ives, I've been advised to withdraw from the meeting for that agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 7, it's not within my ward, but my kids play for Huntingdon Cricket Club, and obviously I'm a resident of Huntingdon as well.
Thank you. Item 5 as well. So I'm a town councillor in St Neots, and so I am on various different groups for the Market Towns programme.
Thank you, Chair. Item 5, I'm on the Market Town building, or the Priory Centre building delivery group.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, just for completeness, under this item 7 with regard to SIL, I'm also the County Councillor for the Auchenbury and Kimbolton division, which covers Tilbrook.
Thank you for that. That's quite a few. Okay. Item 3, overview and scrutiny.
So the Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme and the forward plan are in the agenda pack. Is there any questions on any of the items within that? I think Councillor Corley.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted, excuse me, as somebody who was originally involved in the outside appointments working group. Sorry, am I looking at the right piece here? Yes. It'd just be interesting because when I was looking at it, it said. Sorry, I'm just finding the right page. It was talking about how that's going forward and plan to regularly review and monitor implementation of the recommendations. Has anything happened? Because I certainly haven't heard anything as a councillor.
So that's in progress at the moment. It'll be out with you very shortly, the progress of how we're going to be implementing that coming into the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Item 4, response to questions from previous meetings.
So they're just in the agenda pack. There is the answers to some questions which were answered following the last meeting. So they're just there to note, unless there's any further questions raised by the answers. No.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, the question that I posed was concerning the discrepancy in the number of properties reported, and I've been given the same response that I was delivered on the night, and I'm really, with respect, I think this warrants an actual schedule of properties, please. We're saying we're two, there with a variance of two, and there may be two reasons given here, which is very woolly. So I think, with respect, I would expect a complete answer, please, and a full schedule of properties.
That's fine. That's obviously the answer that I've been given from the officers, so I will push that back and see if we can get some more information for you there.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Item 5, Market Town update.
Good evening, colleagues. It's me again doing one of these. Again, I have lost track slightly of how many quarterly updates you've had from me. Can I start, well, with two apologies. One is you just have me before you this evening. You may note Pam, our lead officer on this work, is, I'm afraid, unwell and isn't able to join us. I will do my best to assist you unaided, but clearly, there may be points we need to take back to give you a firm steer, not least as Pam isn't on hand to correct and clarify as necessary, as normal. The second apology is that the cover sheet to the Market Towns report gives the context of the Market Towns work and then says the update particularly highlights and proceeds to list the full report underneath. That is, of course, entirely deliberate because what we want to highlight is everything. It's not one of our occasional deliberate mistakes we include to check if Councillor Jennings is reading his papers and checking the numbers, which he always passes with flying colours, as we've established previously. But in summary, Chair, in St Ives, the design's being finalised for the Broadway improvements. In Huntingdon, the Cromwell Museum has identified a nearby property to seek to acquire to expand into. In Ramsey, we've commissioned concept designs for the Great White projects and presented a feasibility study to the Town Council. Shopfront grants are live across all the market towns, and we've now had applications from all the market towns with 8 shops completing works already. And various other things, as well as, of course, things are a bit busy in St Neots. So main work has commenced and is well underway now on the Market Square. We've signed a development agreement with the owner of the Old Falcon and are close to submitting a planning application befitting its heritage value. And we've submitted a planning application for redevelopment of the Priory Centre. We've also appointed an artist for the public art project through the Town Council and appointed a designer for the stage in St Neots. But apart from that, the Market Towns team have had their feet up for the last quarter, Chair. So huge amount of work ongoing. I am very happy to walk you through some of that, perhaps the bits I anticipate being of most interest in more detail, if that would be useful. On the other hand, you've got a full agenda tonight, and people may wish to jump in with questions already, but I'm in your hands, really, Chair.
That's right. Thank you for that. I'm happy for a brief overview, and if anyone wants questions, we can actually address them specifically. But I recognise that you're flying solo tonight, and you won't necessarily have all the information. But this is being recorded, so we can certainly take away any questions that we have now that Pam or Sam get back to us as appropriate. But I think members should bear that in mind, that he won't have all the information to hand. But thank you, Sam.
Thank you. In that case, in St Neots in particular, which clearly is one of many focuses, but a significant focus and a significant amount of the spend within the Market Towns programme. So we've worked on most of the square by now, at least to some extent in the Market Square and the town centre elements of the works. The hoardings have moved around a fair amount around those works, because we're trying to keep not more than a third of the square hoarded off at any one time. We've made improvements to hoarding designs after supply issues limited what went up originally, but the focus is on pace to help businesses that are in the square as much as possible for when the weather gets warmer, when some of them need to use elements of the square to support their business, and ideally as well to try to beat Christmas. As members will recall, the project is planning on the works taking a full year, taking us into January of next year, but we are doing our darndest to enable finishing sooner rather than later, because of course we were able to allow Christmas lights switched on in the Market Square last Christmas. It would be a wonderful bonus if we could do that again this year, but as I've said previously, that's not a promise, but it's certainly an ambition to keep us motivated. The hoardings are not as solid or permanent or attractive as they might be for exactly that reason around pace, so that they can be moved around most easily. We are moving the contractor compound to the Splash Park site to free up Riverside Car Park, which we've borrowed to date, as members will recall, despite it being underwater for the first parts of the project, and despite the flooding elements, no delays have been reported so far with respect to the town centre works, but it is still early days, so please do not be surprised when inevitably, I'm sure, this will happen, but we are ready to manage delays as necessary. We've already preempted some issues by resequencing some elements, particularly around some supply issues. So that's the town centre element. The Old Falcon is clearly a massive element of improving the public realm in the centre of St Neots. So we have been working carefully on this, behind the scenes somewhat to date. This section puts more information into the public domain, hopefully positively. We've entered a legal agreement to work in partnership with the owner of the Old Falcon, which is in private ownership, to progress development of the site, to bring it back into active use. We've got proper specialists involved, so architects experienced with heritage buildings, conservation experts and others, so the plans can work commercially, which is necessary for anything to take place, but crucially to do so respecting the heritage value and the special setting of the building on such a prominent location overlooking the Market Square. We're at an advanced stage in developing a joint planning application with the existing owner, which we're expecting to submit by next month. Now, the building's been dormant for a number of years, as colleagues from St Neots on both sides of the table know better than me. It's significantly deteriorated in that time, as our survey work has made even clearer to us as we've undertaken it. So there is an awful lot of work yet to do, but subject to obtaining planning permission, the owner would seek to redevelop the site per the agreement with us under that planning permission. Now, we imagine there'll be significant interest in the details of those, so I'd assure members, of course, that plans will be published as part of the planning submission and will be open to consultation in the normal way as a planning application at that point. I'm quite sure we can do some focus conversations with the Town Council around helping present what's contained within that application as that takes place as well. And the third major element of the Future High Streets work is the Priory Centre. So informed by the consultation on the design we've developed with local input from the Town Council and other stakeholders, including Councillor Jennings, consultation that took place, public consultation that took place just before Christmas, we have submitted a planning application now for the Priory Centre. Since costings are just estimated at this stage, there may well be adjustments required to keep within budget while maximising what we can get within the budget as we proceed. So we're continuing to engage in great detail with the Town Council, who are of course also the building tenants. So we're expecting to procure contractors this summer and to commence work in September. The building would close for a full calendar year from that point. So, 12 months rather than for the complete calendar year. And that's in order to do the works as efficiently as possible and get the most bang for our buck, as it were. We are also exploring scope to sustainably reuse materials not required on the Market Square to improve some of the public spaces surrounding the centre as well. So there's no certainty on whether that will be able to proceed, but it feels sensible to explore given the materials we've got. Shall I leave it there, Chair?
Thank you. I think you've given enough of an overview, and I'll open it to members for questions at this point. Any questions? Councillor Pickering.
Thank you. So just starting where you finished on the Priory Centre, if I may. So the public consultation was really excellent, and some really superb kind of representations of the plans, both the models and the displays, and very knowledgeable staff helping to answer questions on site as well. I haven't been able to find the planning application in the portal, so I wondered if you could say how the actual submitted plans compare to what was presented at the consultation. Are there any significant differences to what was presented, and also just on the item of the costs that you mentioned? I understand that we can't confirm the costs at this stage, but so my question is really around what are there elements of the design which are at risk, which are likely to disappear from the plans, if we can't meet the budget that's been set.
Thank you. So the report includes, have we called it an appendix or an annex? But we have included as one or the other a copy of the statement of community engagement that is part of the planning application, which does touch upon some of that in more detail, Councillor Pickering. So fundamentally, the planning application that we've submitted heavily resembles what was consulted about, but there have been adjustments, for example, around the siting of the toilets to make them more accessible, and the importance of some of the layout on the ground floor. In terms of the accessibility of the plan, no, it takes a little while, I believe, for applications to get validated and published through the system. So I can well believe it's not live at this moment, but certainly we can, if it's helpful, ping a link to Scrutiny members once that's in the public domain. Yeah, and on costs, thank you. We have deliberately, having established that we were within touching distance, even if beyond budget, but a foreseeable step beyond budget, to achieve quite a lot more than we'd originally realistically imagined within the budget available with the Priory Centre redevelopment. We have deliberately develop plans that would allow us to go beyond budget, subject to a conversation with the Town Council about whether they wanted to contribute as well. But there are various elements of that could be adjusted to keep us within our budget in the event they don't wish to contribute, or depending what comes out of that conversation. So I mean there are all sorts of potential moving parts. I'm keen not to speculate on that because fundamentally it's through engagement with the users of the building, the group we've got and the town council that we'd be best placed to prioritise within that. But we've certainly got scope for coping with a range of budget scenarios.
Thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to touch on the Section 8, the budget update, if possible, Councillor Wakeford. I think we seem to have lost, in previous reports, we talk about the risk of losing grants through being timed out on spending. And there's no sort of mention now in the report of when these deadlines are. I know some time ago that the future high streets and the CPCA money was due to be spent by March 2024, which is obviously past now, and the national highways are September 2024. Now, I see that the future high streets fund money has started to be spent. Does the fact that it's started to be spent mean that we're not at risk of losing any of the balance if it's gone past March 2024? And I believe it was intimated at the last building delivery group that I was at that the CPCA had agreed to a formal extension of the time in which their money needed to be spent by. Is there a drop dead date that has to be adhered to as well?
Thank you. So as we've talked about before, we have multiple funding sources and we are trying to spend the monies soonest that, as it were, run out soonest, so that we've got fullest flexibility with the project while of course using all the resource. Now, with respect to the future high streets elements, we were able to flex beyond March on that, so happy to reassure you that we're not expecting to lose any of that money, but we do have later deadlines this year, which the timing I've set out to you this evening will enable us to meet, but that is an ongoing conversation to ensure that they're content with what we're doing, but they are, they being DLUC. Similarly, with respect to CPCA monies, yes, my understanding is we have indeed clarified that their deadline is later than previously suggested. I haven't got the details of that in front of me, but again, it's just enabling us to sequence which pots, and that may adjust the order of the spend pots, but we are fully expecting to utilise all the sources of budget we've got. So yeah, very happy to reassure you on that.
If I may, Chair, may I ask that that it's possible to bring the dates that these pots have to be spent back as a thing for the next meeting? Thanks.
I'm sure we can do that. As you'll recall, we have sought to be more careful around how we label funding in the public domain, but there is absolutely nothing problematic about us including that element. So in simplifying this, I'm sorry if we've lost a useful element. We can certainly do that. I'm anticipating next time we'll have a part 2 as well, which can go into more detail on the budget situation anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Wickford. I agree with Councillor Jennings. We actually had that before, and I thought we'd got some reassurances about the timelines, but that's good to hear. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Councillor Wayford. I'll keep my questions fairly brief. I won't grill you too much tonight, but you have reminded me that I've got a conflict of interest that needs to be noted for the public art project. So I'm a director of the arts charity that has been commissioned to do that. My questions. So I've had various conversations with officers at town level and the contractors on site and residents in St Neots about kind of the schedule of works and how have we got a programme that runs across the whole 60 weeks. We're getting the weekly updates, but it'd be quite nice for councillors to see the entire length of that programme. I don't know if that exists or whether we've got access to that.
We do indeed have all sorts of detailed plans at different scales, and of course there are dependencies within lots of them. So you're aware that we're publishing the weekly bulletin updates around works that will sort of impact local residents and businesses. We also included, if memory serves, the highest level plan in the last quarterly update. We are already reflecting on how we can, without publishing an unhelpful level of detail, including sort of tentative caveated details, because ordering is subject to progress in different areas. We are certainly thinking about how we can more clearly set out some sort of high level plan, for example, in the website information. So there isn't a plan or graphic included within this report or its appendices, but I think it's an entirely reasonable ask. As I say, it chimes with our reflections as well around what we think residents would wish to see. So I can commit we're working on how best to convey that, Councillor Slade.
Okay, thank you. The next question is the digital screen. So the location plan would be quite nice to see kind of where the specific locations where we're expecting to see these. I was up in Ely a couple of weeks ago. They've got some quite nice digital signage, but some of them are in quite odd locations, one of them facing a wall. So I thought that was a bit strange. So it'd be quite nice to see some sort of location plan to help us with that.
Thanks. And I could perhaps usefully have said in a summary, of course, on the digital screens, we've completed procurement, we've awarded the contract as set out in the report now, and so we're working with the partners who are largely the town councils as well as the business investment district, the BID here in Huntingdon, on how to plan a deployment. So the conversations around locations are subject to discussion with each of those stakeholders. I seem to recall when I was last before St Neots Town Council, or was it the last but one time, we did include some fuller information around the screens in St Neots and made suggestion of location. So again, I don't have that in front of me now. It is significantly determined by input from the local stakeholders, but I'm sure between ourselves and St Neots Town Council we can update you about that, Councillor Slade, certainly.
Councillor Jennings, did you have another question?
Thank you, Chair. It's a very specific question. I've been asked by a resident, actually. It's regarding the market kebab van on the Market Square, which is currently using the paved area that was never even part of the car park before, because that's all now been taken up. It's now on that paved area outside the cafes. Is the intention, do we have any knowledge about whether the intention is that the kebab van will be driving onto the new Market Square?
Thanks. So I think this is partly a licensing question, and given legalities associated with that, in an abundance of caution, as I don't have an officer accompanying me, rather than speak to it off the cuff, I'd be grateful to just follow up offline around expectation there. But suffice to say that's I think beyond the scope of the public realm improvements within the project, but it's an entirely reasonable question around how the public space might be used. But we'll pick up offline if we may.
Thank you for that. Now, just remind members again that Councillor Wakeford is doing his best, but he can obviously, if he can't answer any questions, he can take them away. Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. The news about the Old Falcon is very welcome indeed. It's great to hear the significant progress on that front. I I assume it's much too early to talk about any even indicative timescales for any work there, but given that the start of work is likely to be some way off, I wondered if there's any update or whether there have been any further discussions on short-term cosmetic improvements to the old Falcon.
Thank you. Yes, you're right to be realistic around expectations for progress on the site, because while we've made significant progress in getting to the point of being able to submit a planning application that we hope will command a measure of support locally. Clearly, it's never going to meet all aspirations for everybody, but that we feel goes further than previous withdrawn abortive applications were able to on the site before we started working jointly. That will take time to achieve the permission, then to commence the works, then to complete the works. The facade improvements that we talked about before are very much a live area of conversation still. Within the last 24 hours, I've been involved in discussions around quotations for elements. So yes, we are looking at what exactly we can do. Elements of that may be subject to permissions, but that's rather watch this space. So it is certainly something we're seeking to progress along the lines we've discussed previously at Scrutiny. I'd be keen for us to see some facade improvements sooner than the works, full works taking place.
Thank you. Councillor Slade, did you have this?
Yeah, I've got one more. I forgot. Sorry. The under reputational risks. So at a town and county level, we are responding to a kind of a lot of the engagement that the district is doing. So they're kind of pushing the message out, and then kind of colleagues in other authorities are kind of replying to responses from residents. I'm just wondering whether there's anything. I know our comms team are quite stretched, but it's just wondering if there's any way we can have kind of a two-way street that comes from this district rather than it being just from county and town level.
So we've commissioned county to project manage, and then as part of the contract that they've agreed on our behalf with the contractor, there is then public and business engagement work done by the contractor as well. So there's lots of dimensions, as you rightly say, to the comms and engagement beyond what we are doing as internally with HDC comms. I think if there's we are running regular, fortnightly drop-in sessions for St Neots councillors as we've started as the works really got into gear a few months ago. We're certainly planning on continuing to run those. So you've got a channel of communication with the team to pick up issues, including informally. There's obviously scope to liaise with us directly. As may be needed, if there's a sense that there's a gap that we could usefully seek to do some more work to fill in empowering yourselves as members to feel that you know what's going on, particularly St Neots members, and really I mean St Neots members generally, not merely those of you on this scrutiny panel. We are all ears, so very happy either to, if you wanted to elaborate on that now, or to pick up offline in thinking about how we can help help ensure you're across what's happening and able to answer the inevitably myriad questions from residents.
No, that's good. We can pick up on that later. I'll have a chat with you.
Are there any other questions? Sam, you got off lightly, I think. Thank you. Thank you. Now we're on to item 6, which I think you're doing as well, aren't you?
Is Councillor Wickford not continuing through the rest of this report? I had other questions on other elements.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. My apologies. Yes. Okay. Open the floor for other questions. Councillor Coyle.
Thank you, Chair. I misunderstood. I thought Councillor Wakeford was going to then take us through some other parts of the report, but my mistake. No. My mistake. I can ask the questions without you going through. I was just a question around the Cromwell Museum expansion. Just as I read the report, excuse me, the council has awarded significant funds towards the expansion of the Cromwell Museum in Huntingdon. And then it goes on to talk about how the Cromwell then has to identify another building because obviously its existing building they can't expand, and I totally get that. Can I just understand, have we invested money in them being able to buy a new building? That was what I wanted to understand from that paragraph there. And if so, I presume there's some sort of deal on the table that we get some sort of reward for that. And it'd just be useful to understand what that is, if you don't mind. If you can answer that. If you can't, I'm happy to take a reply later on.
No, you are very, very tolerant. Happy to address. So you are absolutely right in your reading of that. So we had initially looked at the funding being to support some sort of expansion on the current site. As you may be well aware, site is fairly tight. It proved that there wasn't a realistic way of doing that, and really they need additional space. So the funding that we're contributing would be enabling them to acquire additional space. But that wouldn't cover then redeveloping that space into the high quality museum space they'd need. So it's why we framed this as being supporting them to acquire a building as the basis then for a Heritage Lottery application that they're working on as well to support the next stage of that development. So this would be helping unlock and enable expansion, but to be crystal clear, the amounts that we're supporting with aren't going to deliver that entirely. No, and in the second part of your question, no. Given the nature of the funds, I don't think we're expecting a quid pro quo as part of the purchase. This is to support that as an outcome. No.
So I have another question for something else of that side. So the Shopfront grant scheme, I was very intrigued to read about this, and I think it's a great idea. And I think this may have come up at council. I can't remember, so correct me if I'm wrong. But we're limiting it to St Neots, St Ives, Huntingdon, Ramsey. Is there anything to stop us allowing some of the other centres, Brampton, Great Staughton, Kimbolton, who all have shops, who all have small high streets granted, to be part of this scheme?
Yes, in a word, I'm afraid, as part of this particular scheme, and the answer is the combined authority, not because they are malicious in wishing not to expand it, but simply because this is CPCA money for market towns specifically. Sorry, so I'm oversimplifying. So that is true with respect to the Huntingdon and the St Ives monies. Within the programme, we were then able to find some monies that weren't being fully utilised in some of the legacy St Neots monies, which is where we've got the pot there, and some efficiencies elsewhere in the programme is where we found funding for Ramsey as well. But it is still within the market towns work. That all said, the success and popularity of the scheme has not escaped us, and we are very much considering and exploring scope for doing something similar beyond, but I wish to manage expectations because we haven't identified a budget line for doing that. But certainly, I'd love to expand something like this more broadly if we can. If I may, Chair, just to add, as I did mention at Council, I can update the figures a little bit in the table in the paper. So the key one being that Ramsey has now entered a plural number of applications. It is still sort of slow and steady behind St Neots and the longer standing market towns in the scheme. But I've been in Ramsey talking with business owners on the Great White myself, and it certainly it feels like there is a measure of interest in this scheme, and we're anticipating applications to creep up further.
Thank you, Councillor Wakewood. I remember actually this question has been asked before, and it was a bit of an issue. Councillor Corney.
Yeah, thank you. I've got several. You'll be pleased. The first one's just been answered by one of my colleagues at Ramsey, because I thought I'd actually messed up my attendance record at Ramsey Town Council, because it was saying about the presentation on the 24th, but it didn't happen, did it? It's happening next week, I believe. So panic off. I'm okay. My attendance record is still there. I've got several questions. Obviously, we're a little bit further behind. So, with regards to funding, Andy asked some reassurance that the funding's still going to be sound. Obviously, we're that bit further behind. So, is there any issue with that? That was my first question. I don't know if you want me to roll through, or do you want to?
If we do it question by question, I'm less likely to forget, and you're less likely to wonder if I'm conveniently skipping the harder ones, Councillor Corney. So we are confident that we've got ability to use the budget as it stands. I mean, you say we're further behind. I mean, the funding that we identified for this was identified a number of years subsequent to the funding being identified for the St Neots work. So in a sense, yes, it sort of started and will therefore progress further down the line at a later stage. But we are fully intending to utilise the budget there as well. And thank you for the correction I should have offered around the report, the hazards of drafting in advance in anticipation of when it's then read.
Yeah, thank you. And then with regards to the digital boards, do we have an idea of when these will be rolling out? So it's moving along steadily. And the reason I ask again for being protocol here, Ramsey has an issue with a redundant one that's a bit of an eyesore, a bit of a safety hazard, and it's I think lots of people ask me about it. So this would be welcome news to say it's going to happen imminently.
Yes, so hopefully Scrutiny members have an invite in their diaries for a session when the successfully procured contractor are going to run through some of what they've some of what their systems can do. There's an element of bespoke design for each, so we can't show precisely what is going to be included because that's going to come out of the discussions with the councils. We are starting deployment over the coming months with the aim to complete them, implementation and handovers and so on by March 25 is the date we've got in the report. So it's happening, but don't literally hold your breath. But certainly we're further on than we were before. And I think one of the reasons it's important to take a bit of time is to help support the councils and the bid in making sure that they're actually confident that these are going to be useful and they're going to be using them in ways that they're confident in doing and in maintaining as well, because we've given previous reassurance that there's scope to pull them out at the end of the period, which absolutely is otherwise a concern. We don't want to leave people with redundant technology. However, there is option to leave them in and for the councils to agree further contracts later if they themselves if they feel that they're valuable.
Oh, they're there. Okay, well, I might take that one offline with you then, because I know the one, it's a HTC installed piece of equipment that's in a very poor state of repair, and it's open to the elements, which is also with a live power cable to it, which doesn't actually fill us with a lot of confidence. But I'll take that off afterwards. Finally, you'd be pleased to know, with regards to shop fronts, and two or three of the businesses have actually sort of asked me in the last week or so, but one particularly today. You're right; they're very keen to go through it. The issue with some of them are sort of coming up with, and this could come across the board for all of our market towns. If it's a conservation area, obviously there's a planning, obviously an application to go through, and that's sort of, you know, I've tried to sort of settle their nerves as much, but it's putting them off a little bit, and I guess they're worried that it's not going to happen quick enough. To do what they potentially like to do. The grant might not be there when they've gone through the process. So it's sort of time. It's about timing, isn't it, more than anything? So is any sort of reassurance from there? But the one from today was quite an interesting one as well. And I might look at Clara for this one. She's sort of sat over there. One of the people that one of the business owners that came to me and actually come up to me today, and they've just taken the lease of one of the pubs in town, and they'd like to revert the name back to its original, the original name of the pub itself, and they'd like to apply for this, but they're worrying about planning permission again, whether that would be But so I'm looking at. Yep, that's going to be a call. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just on the earlier thing you mentioned, absolutely. If there's HTC technology that's unsafe in Ramsey that we don't know about, we certainly want to know about it urgently. So please do pick up with me whether or not it's part of the Market Town's work. We'll certainly have that looked at. With respect to planning considerations, yes, you're absolutely right. There may well be a need to apply for planning permission, but of course these are relatively small, straightforward applications. That may sound like famous last words, but a number of the applicants so far have jumped through the planning hoop and have successfully obtained it, and that's how we've got completions already in Huntingdon and St Ives. So yes, it is a step that needs to be undertaken, but it's not proved a barrier for businesses in Huntingdon and St Ives, and I'd urge your residents and businesses in Ramsey not to allow concern about that to prevent them taking advantage of what's available. And with respect to renaming, we have been clear that we'll take as broad a view as possible as to types of improvements. So something that included that as well sounds potentially able to meet the rules. Clearly, I'm not going to comment on specifics. And if I may, finally, Chair, just remind colleagues as well, as we talked about last time, we've taken the opportunity of expanding the scheme to St Neots and Ramsey to relaunch it, do some further comms across all 4 market towns, and to underline our interest and openness to ways of improving accessibility of shops as well. That was in there before, but we've given that more prominence. So by all means mention that when you're talking with businesses as well.
If I can just come in on that one, because I've got several shopfront grants in the conservation area in St Ives, and they've actually gone through and it's not been a problem. Famous last words, of course, but so and it's not favouritism, but they seem to go fairly clear. Do you have any more questions? Are there any more questions on any aspects of Market Town Update? Okay. Now, Sam, I think you are, Councillor Wickford, you can take that hat off, and now we're actually into shared equity.
Thank you. So, if I can move through my copy of papers. Forgive me, Chair. I think you are also expecting me next in the agenda to present the UK Shared Prosperity and Rural England Prosperity Fund update. So UK SPF and REPF funding is part of the government's so-called levelling up agenda. It's replacing European Union structural funds, not anywhere near as large as those, despite certain promises on buses, but we won't go there this evening, please, colleagues. But they are still substantial, so nearly 1.6 I am kidding, Councillor Gardner. I don't recall that being written on a bus, but there certainly were assurances about them being equivalently valuable. But regardless, they are still valuable. £1.6 million nearly of the shared prosperity elements, as well as contributions to county-wide works. As well as nearly £1 million in rural prosperity. There are different rules for those two streams within the funding pots. There are project updates set out in the report. They're fairly wide-ranging, meeting a number of different objectives from within the SPF pillars and the rural objectives around businesses and communities. The funding runs through to the end of this new financial year as well. So much of this is still in train and still to be spent. Some of it is weighted latterly in that period anyway. But the report shows updates so far since we reported a year ago. So there are no delegations sought here, but it's an update. As we said, we come back. Members may note there is less progress on the rural prosperity elements than the SPF parts of the programme, and that's largely a result of the funding coming through later, as we forewarned colleagues a year ago, if you recall that conversation. So, again, I could run through elements in more detail, but I think it's probably more helpful if I just stop there and can either pick up questions or take things back to relevant members of the team, because while this is being managed from within this is being managed in one place in the council, but delivery spans across elements of it, so there's lots of officers involved.
Are there any questions from members? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. With regard to the REPF project activity, have you got any dates yet with regard to which schemes you're likely to go ahead with regard to the EV charging in rural areas and the two farm diversification projects? It will be interesting for members, I believe, to note where these projects will be undertaken and when they're likely to be undertaken.
Thanks, Councillor Gardner. So the best updates I can point you to are the Q4 updates in the right-hand column in the appendix to the paper. So following the EV charging policy, we're then able to move, being adopted, we're able to move into those detailed conversations then to inform where aspects are delivered, and likewise conversations with respect to the other elements are at an earlier stage. There's some information in the columns there. I'm probably not in a position to elaborate much, but happy to signpost and pick up further in due course. As I alluded to, because we're at an earlier stage with these elements, there is more work still being developed, but absolutely we can come back in more detail in due course.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. In Appendix 1, Councillor Wakeford, we talk about the outcomes to be delivered on various projects. And three of those projects, the active travel, the Ramsey Market and the vibrant communities, all have outcomes that say that they're looking to improve the perception of accessibility and improve perception of facilities and amenities available. All three of them have that. How are we going to measure whether those outcomes have actually been achieved?
Well, we're seeking to improve perception and reality, and there's a mutually reinforcing element of that, of course, where there is confidence that active travel is possible, people can undertake more of it, and then that enables further progression. The question around how we quantify, I think, is a good challenge, and I think we are working on how we can better articulate and demonstrate and prove value for, frankly, all of these projects. We have done various steps internally to strengthen project governance and ensure that we're learning iteratively as we are undertaking projects, rather than only looking at the end and asking those sorts of questions. So we have a mechanism to throw that in. I can certainly take back the particular challenge on the even greater difficulty of measuring something more abstract like perception, but I think that's helpful to flag.
If I may actually question myself, actually, I was looking at the risks, and I think I mentioned it before, the amount of money put in the budget's very parsimonious, I would have said, actually. It's like 39,000 for a 3-year period. And again, sort of, are we comfortable that we've actually got enough resources there to actually run with this programme? I'm not expecting you, Sam, obviously, to answer that, but obviously it's just a concern, and perhaps Pam or whoever can come back. That would be helpful. It's just a concern.
Thank you. You continue to be understanding of me alone, Chair, but no, it's an entirely reasonable question. As you mentioned, you have raised it before. You won't be surprised that we've picked that up as well. I think the short answer, though I'm sure Pam could give a better and longer one, is that we are confident with respect to this in particular, but certainly as a general point, if government was more open to making greater allowance for the spending of grants in managing and maintaining and doing the sort of boring things required to spend money as well as possible, rather than merely wanting to be maximising funding on doing the shiny thing, that would be of assistance to HDC, to councils across the country. I think that's true of decisions around grant funding in all sorts of contexts, with different political colours. I don't mean that as a party political point at all. But so you are alluding to a real issue, but in the context, this is certainly manageable.
Councillor Cawley.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just ask about the Huntingdonshire Business Accelerator Fund. And now, interestingly, I had this in my report to my parish councils over the last month because it had popped up, and I thought, let them know. And it's great to see it's launched. But where can my parish councils find out the details of what this is about, to sort of direct those small businesses or those startups? Because I think it's a fantastic initiative, and it'd be a shame if we couldn't get an oversubscription almost, and have to sort of find more money in the long term to do this. So can someone tell me where we can get all the details?
That is a very good question, because you're quite right. People need to know about them. I can assure you that there is knowledge about them. I've certainly had conversations with some businesses and winners of the Jumpstart competition, which is also listed in the programmes here around availability of accelerator support to help them progress to the next stage. There is information about all this on the economic development pages of our website, which I'm sure we can ping a link to. But we are all, I'm sure I'm not fully capturing the range of ways we try and communicate out to businesses. We certainly contact directly. We keep databases of local businesses and contact in a targeted way around how we can support where we've got people on our books. I'm sure there's a fuller answer, but I hope that's reassuring for the time being. And as I say, I'm sure we can ping you a link that you can share with businesses in your district.
Yeah, if you don't mind, can I just suggest, Chair, that we ask that's something that's sent in the update to the councillors, or either a weekly bulletin or whatever, because it's very important information that I know that others should want to know that.
Yes, I think if I may, I think that's a very reasonable ask. I seem to recall we have circulated information that may have been in a standalone press release, and the value of continuing to, which went to all members, but continuing to include that, I think, is very helpful.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. On page 55, I think 53, sorry, with regard to active travel feasibility studies, how can parish councils come to you, because you're saying you've got 5 route feasibility or possibility of 5, how can parish councils come to you to put their particular scheme to see if that could be one of those 5? Because I do know myself and Councillor Conboy have been looking at one particular scheme between Tilbrook and Kimbolton, which the parish council has spent a lot of time and effort. They've done surveys and what have you with regard to putting in an active travel route from one village to another to enable access to the schools, to doctors' surgeries, to shops and everything else, which Tilbrook do not have any. So it would be useful to know how a village like Tilbrook could apply to such a scheme, or to put their name forward to see whether you're prepared to take it any further. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. So, as the appendix references, we undertook a district member workshop in January. From memory, you were there with us, Councillor Gardner, because I certainly recall us discussing your contributions. Perhaps you were unable to attend, but you dropped us an email with some asks, because I recall name checking you more than once. So you may already have succeeded in putting some asks. But again, as the update references, we have scoped a fuller delivery plan. One of the reasons that we are keen to work with Sustrans to manage the project this year is to assist with capacity around fuller engagement, to make sure that we aren't just picking easy routes off a map, but that we are incorporating input in the selection of what we're then scoping out in more detail, so that it does command confidence. So there is going to be a way, Councillor Gardner. As for the precise mechanics of that, I think it remains to be announced.
Yes, I was just going to make one further comment, Chair. I would hope to see that we are looking to put active travel routes within rural areas, and we're not just concentrating around towns. Because, if we want people, whether they live in villages or towns, particularly in villages, to get out of their car, we have got to provide an alternative, safe route. If you look at the B645 in particular, it is not a safe road. There are no footpaths along the road. So, you would not walk or anything else from a village like Tilbrook to Kimbolton. You're going to have to go in the car. There is a limited bus service between both villages. So we do need to start to look at how we're going to provide active travel routes for rural areas. I know I bang on about it, but we do need to start to look at how we're going to do that, because they are all those residents in rural areas are residents of Huntingdonshire, and we do need to be making sure that we are providing active travel routes for them, as well as the people in the towns. Thank you, Chair.
You said you do bang on about it. I bang on about it as well, Councillor Gardner. I struggle to disagree with anything that you've just said, and have been making exactly the same point, including around the B645, linking up the elements of paths that do exist, then, as you say, with an enormous area in the middle. There is scope to improve accessibility, of course, to places like Great Staunton, which is a lovely place itself, to achieve connectivity to it for its own sake, but also enabling connection then round to Grafham Water, and there's all sorts of opportunities that would have more strategic value. I have lobbied on that particular project that you name-checked, CPCA and county colleagues involved in active travel, arising from our collaborative discussions about this in the past. We continue to appreciate your banging on, which we take purely constructively. So thank you for that. I entirely agree with you. This administration agrees. We follow the same logic with respect to public transport as well as active travel, and that informs a lot of our engagement with the wider CPCA, as we've touched on in other places.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments on that issue? Oh, Councillor Blackwell, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be brief, Councillor Wakeford. It's a follow-on from Councillor Gardner's point on the active travel. You mentioned up to 5 routes, but there seems to be obviously a lot of meetings, a lot of consideration at the moment, but we're going into the time of year to attract people to use the cycleways or paths. So are we considering, even when we have certain routes designated, even if we haven't got the 5, are we rolling out so that we can get them in use? And second point is you've confirmed it's sustrans, not sustrains, which probably just needs amending in the agenda. Thank you.
Yes, sustrans don't do trains. That's a good spot. Let me be clear about what these are and aren't, though. The 150,000 budget is not going to deliver us 5 active travel, cycleways or similar across large swathes of our district, not even close. The purpose of this funding is to develop feasibility studies for routes so that we have a firm basis for which to bid for money as and when it becomes available, which linked to the whole premise of the Market Towns work I've been talking with you about earlier this evening. It's because we have to be ready to pounce at bigger pots of money as and when they become available, because otherwise we miss them, otherwise we aren't able to take advantage of them. So it is frustrating that we have to do some things in stages, but the way funding works of our council, dare I say, increasingly as we're in more straitened financial times in terms of public spending, we need to be able to make the case. So this is money we've got to develop a feasibility for routes so that we can get those delivered. So there's nothing that's going to happen for this summer's cycling season, if that's what you're getting at. But that does not mean it isn't really important for us to do this so that we've got aspirations, as Councillor Gardner rightly says, because it links to our broader objectives around supporting residents to change behaviour, to support climate change objectives, reducing costs of travel if it's easier for people to cycle in rather than having to incur the costs of running a private vehicle and so on.
Any more questions? Excellent. Thank you very much for your valiant efforts in answering all those questions. That's right. Community infrastructure levy.
Chair, while we're getting set up, as I'm one of the applicants on this, how are you planning on doing this? Are you going to go through each individual one, and then I was just thinking I'll probably best to leave, if that's okay. Okay, I'm happy to answer any questions on my particular one before I go, if anybody would like to be home. So.
Sorry.
Just for clarification, we're going to take all the issues as they appear on the report so everyone knows when they have to duck out, as Councillor Conway's just said. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Good evening to members. So delighted to report on the latest run of community infrastructure levy bids. As you know, it's a planning charge introduced by the Planning Act in 2008 and helps deliver infrastructure to support development of the area. So the latest funding round was launched on the 27th of November, closing date of the 22nd of January. Bids received within that round for funding towards infrastructure projects have been assessed by the officer team to reach the recommendations in this report. There are approximately 12 of them, and sort of range from, you probably see, from the Hilton Pavilion to a footpath in Colne and various other project requests. So the real purpose of the report is really just to outline where those projects are seeking funding. Some of them are in whole or in part. So some of them you may notice have asked for 100% funding, others haven't. They've asked for a much lower percentage. And up to 5% of SIL receipts in each financial year may be retained for administrative costs. And 15 to 25% of SIL receipts, the meaningful proportion, they're passed down to to town and parish councils. And obviously, if a parish council has a neighbourhood plan, they'll get a higher percentage of that at 25%. So to date, we've allocated funding to 52 projects, and that totals just under £27.5 million. And the total cost of the projects that helps to support is around £102 million. So that's pretty substantial. Also at Appendix 1, there's a report on the items for the up to £50,000 applications. So obviously that's delegated, but the over 50,000s will go through the scrutiny process and to Cabinet. And there's around, I think, £33 million that's unallocated. But obviously there will be heavy demands on that. Strategic transport like the A428, A141, the infrastructure delivery plan. So all those projects are outlined at 4.1. And happy to take questions. Sorry.
Councillor Corney.
Okay, I've got a question and a comment as well on the actual process, but we there's a lot that are refused at the moment, and so if you, what as a council, what are we doing wrong? Because I'd like to think that these, the applications should be coming through. Probably, some are quite obvious. I'm not going to go through which ones I think because some are quite, clearly they're declined for the right reasons. But is our message not getting out there? Is it not, not clear enough? Or are we setting our standards? Is the bar too high? Maybe is there something? Maybe a bit of both. But I just sort of feel that, we look at this, there's 12, most of which are being declined, and like I say, and on a grant that some of them are quite clearly, so obvious why they're declined, but not, maybe our message is not out there in the first place, it's not hitting the mark, if that makes sense.
I think probably one of the arguments there is that this is the older or current SIL process. This is quite dated, I think. As you know, we are looking to update it, and there'll be a report coming out during the summer months and how we're progressing that. So I think there's some cases where the relevant applicants here haven't demonstrated the need for growth in some areas. They perhaps haven't answered the question. They've maybe answered a question they would like to have been asked. That's always what we're told to avoid when we're doing exams, isn't it? So I think there's an element of that here. There are quite a few declines, and I do share that your concern that it would be more positive if we could be in a place where we could potentially approve more applications. But I think it largely depends on the quality of what we see in front of us. I'm pleased to see Ramsey Community Centre has an award. I've actually been there with yourself a few times, and I see the positive impact that has on the community. And Ramsey's obviously had a lot of growth as well. So that's one of the reasons why Ramsey was successful. And I think your town council put in a very good, high quality application. Did you want to come in?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think it's a very interesting question, and it's certainly the outcome, I don't think, was one that we were all expecting, I think, to be completely honest. If we reflect back, obviously, as the report indicates, we've had this SIL governance in place since 2020, so it isn't new. And if I look at it over the years as well, as a council, we established parish forums, for example, where we had a presence, giving parishes the opportunity to come and talk to us in those forums, or dare I say, approach us outside of those forums. When we went into this round, in part, it was in response to perhaps being told that there were parish councils with oven-ready projects to be submitted. But clearly, what we have seen is that may not have been the case. So I think what we can do is just take away some of these reflection points, and as Councillor Sanderson has alluded to, that we are looking at SIL governance again. It's how we factor that in. But dare I say, as part of that, it's going to be the journey in educating our parish councils themselves as to what they need to do to be able to submit a successful project, rather than, if I may pick up your point about what we as a council are doing wrong. I think it'll be around the theme of communication, per se, but that we're clear on the roles and responsibilities going forward when we think about SIL.
Yeah, please don't think I was sort of making out that it's completely the HCC's fault by any means, but it's just either our messaging to the potential applicants. We've got to look at what we're putting in front of them for the guides, the guidelines, and change that maybe, or So I'm not saying it's certainly us, but I did say I had a comment as well, and actually. So I actually submitted the application. I was made quite a role in that application, but I had to actually I messaged Tom to say did that go in, because the way the form's set up, once you press you put it all in together on the website, you press send and it goes. You don't get a response. There's no email come back at to sort of say yes, it's received, or so I did actually chase whether that was just an unusual occurrence. I don't know, but we certainly didn't get anything back. So that's just as a comment, just to sort of say when we're looking at things, whether because there may well be some people out there thinking, well, how's that gone in? I know we certainly felt that way.
I'll take that on board and I will look into it. It is set up so there's an automatic response to say it's been received and this is your form number. And we get copied into that email as well. So if I've received it, that should have gone as well. But the IT glitches do happen, so I will look into it.
I'm terribly sorry, but we're moving into the realms outside of the functions of this ONS committee. And you're asking questions as an applicant. That is not afforded to any other applicant in this process. And while this is not a decision-making committee, but the questions you're exceeding your role as a councillor in terms of wearing your councillor hat for the purpose of an ONS committee, and speaking as an applicant in terms of some of the questions you're posing. So just need to make sure which hat you're wearing tonight at the table. And apologies to intervene, just to ensure that you're not acting in any conflict of interest in terms of your role. Because whilst it's not a decision-making committee, for the purposes it's an ONS, you still need to be careful about which hat you're wearing when you're discharging your councillor function. Thank you, Madam.
Yep, I take it on board completely. And I did ask a question, and I'll be leaving when it comes to that. But if my questions have gone a little bit too far, I apologise, and I'll stop asking now anyway. So there we go.
Thank you. And perhaps that's helpful for all of those of you who may have an interest. If you're seeking to ask a question, but you have on the item that you have an interest in, remember which hat you're wearing, and your question needs to be a generic process question, as opposed to the detail of the item in which you have expressed an interest and will be leaving the room. And again, it's to avoid that conflict of interest and perception.
Well, thank you for the clarification. I hope everyone's clear. on the rule, just to make sure the questions are generic almost rather than specific. Okay, and I think we've all had to learn on that, to be honest. On that issue, can we put that question to bed and then perhaps go to another question from someone that's a little more generic? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. We mentioned a SIL review in previous meetings. Has that now happened, or because I thought all funding was paused until that review had taken place?
So this, I personally felt we needed to do another SIL round. It had been about a year since we'd had the last one, and I thought it was just time. And obviously, the new SIL review will take some time. Organisation called Inner Circle are conducting that for us. They have met with the Cabinet, and I'm sure they'll be expanding their sort of searches and talking to other members. But I felt it would be good just to have that opportunity before we moved to a different process. So applicants were allowed, to have another sort of go, and some, of course, have been successful.
Are there any Councillor Slade?
Can I ask about fire stations? So one of the SIL applications was about a fire station, and it's not about the detail. It's just that in the notes for refusal, it says that it's given the reasonably high level of SIL that's being asked for, and I've kind of looked through the numbers on the other ones, and actually that's quite low. So I just want to see if that was a discrepancy.
I think that was in terms of the amount rather than the percentage. So I think that's what that point was referring to.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Jennings.
Sorry, Chair, I don't know if this is the right place to ask it, but it's a question about something in Appendix 1, which is the previous SIL projects. Or do we wait until after this round has been... Okay, thank you, Chair. It was just really about the path and cycle routes in the Riverside Park St Neots, which I was given an assurance by Councillor Taylor that actually this is going to start in April this year, and it seems to be pushed back again. Is there any certainty that this project really is going to take place in the summer of this year, or is it potentially going to be pushed further and further down the line? It's been 5 years since the money was granted.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I'll look into it and come back to you. I'm not aware of the specific details on that, unless you have some info on that, Ro.
The latest update I have in that is in the update section, but I can see if I can get you a fuller update on that.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. Again, this is a question on the smaller applications. One of them in Godmanchester states that we're waiting for further information. Have we now received that? And also, are we allowed to approve bigger applications in principle subject to waiting for further information?
So I think on the Godmanchester one, I don't think we've received any information. It was quite recent, wasn't it, where I think there was a question about the ownership and whether the project could be delivered. Have they responded to that yet, the Town Council there?
The slight difference is when we offer SIL funding, we can offer it subject to certain qualifications. So that one was offered subject to proof of the ownership of the land and for a specific period. So they've got a specific period of time to come back to me for that. So I haven't received it yet, but they have still got time to come back. So that was offered subject to clarification of that, as many of the projects are offered subject to little bits that are outstanding.
Sorry, what was your second question, Joe?
Does that apply to bigger projects as well, that we can ask for more information?
We have applied the same reasoning to bigger applications. So Alconbury, some of the health facility ones, the school ones. So often it's coming back to us when they've got planning permission to confirm they've got that, or if there's specific concerns that have come out during the debate or reading the application, then they have a set time to come back to us just to confirm those. And releasing the funds would be subject to all those boxes being ticked.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I do need to declare another member's interest, as I am a member of the Cambridgeshire Fire Authority on item 7. Thank you very much, Chair.
Are there any other questions? No. Okay. Thank you for that. We'll move across to item 8 on celebration of Huntingdonshire.
Sorry, Chair, did you want to vote on the recommendation or give us just a steer on the recommendations? Okay, so it's just comments.
Good evening. In fact, I'm actually going to hand swiftly over to my colleague to my right, and then happy to take any questions as we finish the presentation.
Good evening, panel. So firstly, I want to give my apologies for somebody who can't be here tonight. It's Lily Simonite, and those of you that were able to come to the workshop, she actually ran the workshop for the members, so unfortunately she can't be here tonight, but she sends her apologies. So the panel will have had the paper and obviously the slides in advance. So what I want to do is just kind of talk to them rather than all the way through them, but we'll flick through the slides as we go. So one of the really important things about Huntingdonshire Futures is that we are celebrating the place that we all are part of. And we have a couple of anniversaries this year. We have Huntingdonshire Day on the 25th of this month. We have the 50th anniversary of the council being created. And we also have the 40th anniversary of it being named Huntingdonshire District Council. And so for that reason, we were brought together to look at some options to try and support our residents and our communities to undertake some activity that would recognise those things. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, there we go. There we go. So, just really to remind you of the goal. So it was about celebrating what makes Huntingdonshire special, bringing Huntingdonshire Futures as a strategy to life by some activity and stimulating that activity. And we have been working with 2 of the steering groups that have already been set up. So the strategy is split into 5 journeys, as has been explained before. So we've got Health Embedded, which has been started. We've got Inclusive Economy, which has also been started. We've got Environmental Innovation, which is scheduled. It's actually now going to be June this year, primarily because of venues, unfortunately, not because of people. And then we also have Travel Transformed and Pride in Place. So those 2 are awaiting. And so the goal was to influence and enable community action and really to bring that thing to life. But the most important thing about Huntingdonshire Futures is trying to work differently. And I think the work that we've done, and the panel will remember that we came here earlier in the year, literally, I think it was 4th day in the new year, to actually present this idea and to get your engagement. And from that, we determined that it would be good to run a workshop to involve both parish councils and get input from them, also to involve the voluntary sector and some of the social sector as well. So we've actually arranged that and done that. So in terms of the timeline, we came to this panel in January. We then organised the member workshop for the 14th of February, and that was followed the following week by activity online, which was with parish councils and then with also those community voluntary groups to actually inform what we were doing and get some themes out. So then in March, we've collated that together, discussed that with informal cabinet as we would do, and so now it's right and proper that we bring it to overview and scrutiny before we go ahead. So in terms of the engagement, we did an online session, we did a workshop which was here. We also did three online sessions actually. So we did sessions with town and parish councils, so that was 19 people, and then also 2 sessions with 19 attendees across them with that other areas. And we ended up with 3 very common themes that came out from those, which was that we should celebrate people, we should celebrate place, and it should be about connecting communities. In terms of specific ideas then, that were generated that we then need to run through the filter of the principles of Huntingdonshire Futures as a strategy. There was an appetite for an online resource of some sort which actually promotes everything that's already happening, because actually there's loads already happening. There was a desire to promote that. There was support for small grants that would help people to make things happen and very much enable people to do things. That we should announce it in April, and actually at the initial committee it was made very clear that this should be something that runs throughout the year. It shouldn't be something that runs and builds up to on one day, because different communities want to organise things at different times, already have things planned, and so could add additionality to that. And then the really, really loud message was to make it simple and easy. Don't make it really complicated to access. So we've now run that through the filter of Huntingdonshire Futures. And as we've said, that's about a consensus of what everybody wanted, that it's bigger than the district council, and that as a council we're convening, we're doing the encouraging and the enabling and the influencing elements of this. We're not necessarily doing the doing. And if we step into that doing space, we're possibly undermining the principles, which is let's empower everybody within the district to take action. We then had some practical considerations around the ideas, which was they're relatively ambitious, so therefore we might need additional funding, which isn't available. We've got some funding, but we hadn't got that readily available. If we did do that, we'd be eating into some of the funding set up to develop the rest of the journeys for Huntingdonshire Futures, so we'd be robbing Peter to pay Paul. That risk of doing and actually diverting council resource into organising things, whereas actually what we want to do is empower our communities to do things or add value to what they've already got planned, because our communities are very active in Huntingdonshire. They already have lots of ideas and things already on the go, and actually with a little bit of extra support they could make that a bit better and they could promote it better. And the other big risk is we didn't want to commit to something that might start an ongoing expectation that the council would step into that doing space, which we might not be able to sustain. So that leaves us with our suggested approach. So with the 5 journeys, the principle is we should cover them all. We shouldn't necessarily exclude any ideas. So if a community has got an idea that relates to any of those 5 journeys, then that should be considered. That the funding available should be used to support communities to deliver activity. That it shouldn't be the district council doing things, but it should be funding available to them. And that the whole principle is that we're generating communities coming together, because that is a core principle. It's how the strategy was built in the first place. It wasn't the district council in a room. It was us bringing lots of diverse people together to actually distill the journeys and then actually come up with the what-if statements. So the final proposal is a focus on pride of place, that we actually use an existing facility, the community chest,
and add additionality to that. And because that means that we've got something that's already familiar with people that we can add additionality to. And actually, some of the community chest might also add additionality to that as well. It's the same principles. That we should definitely provide examples of the kind of things that it would apply to give people a starter for 10, and that they should be linked to each journey. And that we recognise the importance of marketing those events and link them to actually the Huntingdonshire future brand, that we shouldn't be connecting up or creating yet another entity or another brand to support, that we should keep it very simple. The other thing to say is that we have absolutely listened to and heard the message, which is about all the events that happen in Huntingdonshire, how important they are, and promoting them. However, from a Huntingdonshire Futures perspective, the right place to put those ideas and that input is into some of the work which is being spun up at the moment through economic development and looking at tourism. And there are already some ideas, and there are already some proposals that are already being developed and being discussed within the council that will be brought forward in due course around that. So we don't want to duplicate that effort, and it's important that it's led by the right service. So it's not been left. It will actually absolutely be picked up. So in terms of what happens next, subject to everybody saying, yeah, that seems really sensible, we'll get the best outcomes for our residents through this process. We're in consultation with the team that run the community grants so that we can make sure that they are coterminous, they'll exist well for a year. We're preparing an announcement for that for Huntingdonshire Day on the 25th, so we can be clear what we're doing, how it will be done, and when it will be available. And then there'll be some online activity to promote and celebrate all the activities, and we will work with all the successful applicants to make sure that they have a little toolkit that's really easy to use, so that they can promote it themselves and we can amplify that message. Over to the panel for any questions or observations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions from the floor? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. If there's a community event happening, and has happened a couple of times before as an annual event, is this funding going to be available to them, or is it just for new events?
If it provides additionality and can make it bigger or better or promote it, then absolutely I would say yes.
If I could ask a question, thank you, Neil. You said you did a presentation to parishes. How did that go? How receptive were they on that?
Paul actually attended that one. I wasn't able to, so I'm going to hand over to Paul to actually just describe what happened at that session.
Thank you, Neil. Yes, so the parish session, I believe, was held the following week to the member session. We had an eclectic mix of parishes that attended. We had lots of really excellent engagement, had some good attendance from some of our more rural parishes, had a number that were from the west side of the A1 as well, which was really helpful. So, yes, I think that particular session was really helpful, intrinsic in terms of how we shape the proposition moving forward. And indeed, some of those online sessions, we were asked directly around the proposition around grants and what we could maybe do and look at developing moving forward in that space as well.
Good to hear. Councillor Slade.
Thank you. I think this is a great idea to enable residents and local organisations to kind of step up and deliver stuff in the area. But just working through some of the criteria for the community chest, so there are a couple of limitations in there that I can see that unless we're going to kind of revise some of those, my worrying one is kind of about the time scale. So the panel kind of meet once a month to approve the applications, and so and I'm conscious that we've got a very finite amount of time. So if an organisation submitted one right after a panel had sat, say you might end up with a period of maybe 6 or 8 weeks before they had a final decision. So that would be my one concern about, unless we're going to kind of revise some of those things. If you want to come back on that.
Absolutely, a point very well made. A rolling process for these things is very appropriate. We want to make it as easy and simple, so it will be a tick box type form around, what outcome you're seeking to enable, and what criteria. So it will be simple. It won't be fill in 150 words to explain how it relates to Huntingdonshire Futures. That's exactly what it won't be. And yes, absolutely, in terms of timescales, subject to agreement with the community service who currently operate that scheme, yes, we'll have for these applications. There's no reason why we can't consider them on a rolling basis. I think the important thing to say is that the published community chest criteria has already been tweaked, and we've been in conversation with the portfolio holder for that, because he was keen to make sure that some of those criteria were relaxed. So he's already done that intervention and work, so that actually they already link together better. So I think that will probably address some of your concerns.
Thank you. That takes me on to the next question, really, about the panel. So have we got enough resource within the council to do that, whether it's officers or councillors on that panel?
Absolutely, because we're making it as simple as possible, and these are small grants, so therefore the level of governance required for those, we will make sure that we've got a balance on the panel, and that's something that the portfolio holder for community is very, very keen to make sure exists, as well, as you can see Sarah nodding as well. So between them, they're very keen to make sure from a political endorsement point of view that process is very simple and straightforward.
That's great. I suppose given that there is a kind of a short time frame, even if we're getting hundreds of applications, there is kind of an end point. So it's not a case of that it'll be a rolling. Okay, thanks.
I think it would be a mark of success, actually, if we had slightly more than we were thought we might be easily equipped for. I think that would actually show that the take-up has been as successful as we're hoping, and certainly based on the feedback we've had so far, Councillor Slade, I'm very much hoping that because these are small grants and hopefully they're very easily accessed, I'm hoping that we have a really good take-up. What a lovely problem to have is more applications than we might be used to, and trying to make sure that we can get through those as quickly and as swiftly as possible.
Are there any other questions on this item? No, well, Sarah.
So one of the parts of the recommendation is also, we would like to know from you what things that we might be able to do to help councillors to share this opportunity back with your communities, because obviously you are the linchpin back into the places that you represent. So I think one of the things that we're keen to know, and it might be that you'd like to feed back to us offline, but how do we help get this out into the hands of the people that actually might want to access these grants? That's really important, because it's no good us having a really good idea and then the people who could make most use of these not knowing that they're there. So I think that's one of the things we'd really like some feedback on. I'm very happy to take that offline if that suits. But certainly I know that already tonight somebody around this table has already said, what about my parish, and could we and might we? So I know that you'll be fantastic ambassadors, but we have 52 councillors across the chamber, and we really want to make sure that they're great ambassadors back into their communities so that this gets really good take-up.
You make a good point, and I'm sure that all members around the table will actively engage, but particularly Councillor Gardner, who would like to come in at this point.
Thank you very much, Chair. My suggestion would be that you go to communicate to all the parish clerks in the first instance, because I think that would be the quickest way for you to get the information out there to all members. If members, when I go to various parish councils that I've got, I will certainly bring it up, but it may be, depending on when their actual parish council meeting is, it may be quicker to get to the parish clerk first so that they can then start thinking about it straight away, because not every parish meets on a monthly basis. And like one of my particular parishes only meets on like a 6 monthly basis. So if you don't, whereas if you get it out there straight to the clerk, then that would help their situation very much easier to get it across to them.
If I may, Chair, thank you very much, Councillor Gardner. I think that's certainly something we had in mind, and I think one of the real challenges is we'll also then, I suspect, put it out through the member updates, and then I think it's just a case, particularly those of us around the table tonight, you know, to be the champions to remind everybody else in our various groups and across our various patches to make sure that we are reminding clerks it's arrived in their inboxes, but equally encouraging our local communities to take this opportunity. I'm really hoping there's a lot of things on offer over this coming year that communities will be able to get involved in.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Will there be a website that we can direct people to with FAQs and things like that?
Absolutely, but what we want to do is make sure it's part of the community chest, so it's really simple. So absolutely, and we'll do some examples of activity against the different things, and there'll be a very, very simple application form based on ticking boxes about what's applied and then some words and who's responsible. And on your earlier point, if it's an event already existing, it means that it's more helpful because we know that the event's organised and people know how to organise an event. It's going to be very difficult, I think, to organise a fresh event. But I think all of the consultation said there's already loads happening. We don't necessarily need to create new. What we need to do is amplify that it's there and amplify the opportunity for people that are already doing this fantastic work in our communities.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, observations? Okay, we'll move on to the final item, 9. Now, yes, okay.
So within your packs, you will have seen there's the revised budget paper. And just to clarify, this item is just, there's no changes to the HTC budget that was approved by Council in February of this year. The changes are simply relating to the tables and values for the town and parish precepts in 6.0, which is page 151 of the agenda pack, and tables 6.3 and 6.4 on pages 155 and 156 of the agenda pack. It's due to the late notifications of precepts by St Ives and Huntingdon Town Councils. So it's simply for noting those amendments so that you have that.
I'll take that one. Okay. At that point, I'd like to close the meeting and thank you all for your contributions and comments as ever. I'll see you next time. Thank you. Yes.